It's horrible. We finally smash making fake and phony charity work. Hello and a very warm welcome to LVT News Channel. If you look at Meghan and her profile and you sit down and do just a little bit of research on her activities when it comes to women and women's rights and causes that affect women, nobody can deny that she always has tried to push forward an agenda of promoting women's rights and women using their voices. But let's take a little look at the things that Meghan herself discusses or that there is real proof of. Let's begin with a dish liquid commercial. I mean, it's pretty infamous at this point. Meghan spins the story so that she saw a commercial that said that women all around America are fighting greasy pots and pans, and she claimed that when she was a child, this made her feel so upset. So she claims that she wrote to the company Procter & Gamble and then they changed the commercial so that there's no longer singling women out, but there are some big problems with this little story. I mean, it's a nice story, but it's not true. Meghan's teacher, in fact, in school assigned the class to see some commercials and evaluate the messages in those commercials. Meghan was not sitting in front of the TV all by herself, seeing that commercial and going on a crusade that never happened. And Meghan claims that the commercial has changed thanks to her actions, but there is not a bit of evidence to suggest that her letter had any impact whatsoever, and this is why this particular story was killed when they came to that article Wild about Harry. It simply did not make the cut because they couldn't verify her assertions. The clip that is played of little girl Meghan Markle talking to Linda Ellerbee and Nickelodeon was actually set up by her father. He had connections. Nobody ever answered Meghan's letter. There is no way to connect the changing of that commercial to anything Meghan did. But of course that doesn't stop her from using that story to show her lifelong credentials in the area of women's. Another thing is that on her CV or resume, Meghan always talks about her work for you and women. There is a nice video on YouTube of the speech that she gave, but what you're not going to find is her mention that she lifted a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt and claimed it as her own. I mean, what was she thinking? Meghan has failed to explain herself on this issue, and it's pretty bizarre to hear her talk about uplifting women, when in fact she's ripping off the very words of other women and she fails to uplift them with any credit. Meghan loves to discuss her involvement with the One Young World organization. Now last year she gave a speech at the One Young World Summit. She has been involved with the organization since 2014. But to hear her talent, she was humbled and honored to be asked by this organization to join in on the conversation. Her speech at the summit goes into a lot of detail about how humble and honored she was to be offered that seat of. Well, it's a nice little story, but again, the trouble with it is it's not true. The story of how it all started is absolutely not true. One Young World did not actually seek out Meghan. Meghan was the one who sought them out. Maybe she was just grateful that she could get a seat at the table, but the fact that she went to them and asked for doesn't exactly match up with the story that she tells. There are so many more examples of how Meghan has involved herself in charitable endeavors and pushed forward a women's agenda, but what there is not is any real measure of what her efforts have really produced. This is a woman who tells so many lies, and her track record in that arena shows that nothing is sacred when it comes to her. She is going to lie or exaggerate about absolutely anything, and that also includes her charity work. What kind of idiot is going to rip off the words of Eleanor Roosevelt and give a speech at a worldwide summit where she fabricated the story of how she got involved with that charity? What is wrong with her? And Meghan tells lies when it doesn't even make any sense to lie when the truth is equally interesting as the lie. Her One Young World story at the summit is a great example of what I'm talking about. I mean, seriously. Why couldn't she just be honest with that crowd of young people and tell her that she used her connections to try and get her foot in the door with this charity, and that it was important enough to her that not only did she request a seat at the table, but she used whatever means she could to get that seat? It is then that the questions really start popping up. Was it, as has been reported, not so much about One Young World as it was about Meghan trying to make herself seem more important? Every time Meghan's intent is questioned, we get to hear the whole story about the dish liquid commercial and how a child of her age was not trying to raise her profile at all. She was doing what she believed was right. Now, If the story had not changed over the decade to completely alter the reality of what took place back then maybe that explanation could shut down most critics. It was a school assignment, that is the fact of the matter, and Meghan was not the only person who raised that issue. Her letter, in fact, did not prompt any response whatsoever from the company, but telling everybody that the commercial has changed after she wrote that letter implies that Meghan was the catalyst and that she was so instrumental in that change, but that's simply not true. Meghan has been using this story ever since it happened. She even used it to get into the private Catholic school that she went to when she was a teenager. Now, if we're being fair, nobody can really say that Meghan hasn't done anything in relation to the causes that she talks about being so passionate about, but any real cause-driven charity work seems to get completely lost under the weight of Meghan's dishonesty and also some of the charity. A more recent example would be hers and Harry's Archival Foundation. The impact report that archival release looks great on paper. But when you really dig a little deeper and learn more about the claims contained in it, it all just falls apart. Archewell simply cannot take credit for the vaccination numbers in the report, but it sure did try to. Now in this day and age we do have the ability to do research and discover that all is not as we're being told. Only this week it looks like the truth behind archival has been revealed. A life of service requires a lot more than just an hour a week of someone's time. The tax return that are well prepared is a pretty interesting thing to read. Less than $5,000 was actually given to Archibald by the public at large. Archibald only exists because there are two people who gave archival $13 million or two. So one entity or individual gave 3 and the other gave 10. These are just ballpark figures, but they're pretty close. In spite of having over $13 million, Archewell only distributed less than 30% of its funds to charitable causes. It is not very hard to understand the cynicism of most people. In the span of about a week, it has been reported that Meghan is going to be given 2 awards. Now one of those awards is directly connected to somebody known to be friends with Meghan, and the other has chosen a few recipients that many people have not even heard of and has so many awards at his disposal. And a lot of people are asking the question of how much Meghan paid for these awards. It's a pretty good question. Now, it's not proven that she actually paid anything for those awards. It's just as likely that she's using her connections, that she or somebody working on her behalf lobby the people connected with the awards to honor Meghan. It's pretty hard for most people to understand why Meghan of all people is being recognized, considering everything we already know about her with her public image in the gutter, and considering her history. It doesn't seem very far-fetched that it's all just an effort to rehab her image and at the same time try to raise a more positive profile for Meghan in general. People are skeptical about these awards, and people have good reasons to be skeptical. To tell you the truth, I think Meghan is just beating a dead horse right now. It is way too late for her to elevate her profile or to have any real impact on any important causes. I mean, bragging and a lack of humility are not attractive, and neither is chasing after awards, which is apparently a lot easier for her to do than any real work. And what do you think about Harry and Meghan? Please tell me your opinion below in the comments section. If you think my video is useful, don't be afraid to like and share with anyone else who would enjoy it, and please subscribe to our LVT News channel to get more updates in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day, and I'll be back to see you in the next